Our reading from the Gospel of Matthew begins at chapter 16, verse 24. Then Jesus told his disciples, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit them if they gain the whole world but forfeit their life? Or what will they give in return for their life? For the Son of Man is to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay everyone for what has been done. Truly, I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly there appeared with him Moses and Elijah talking with him. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud a voice said, "This is my Son, the beloved, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome with fear. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Get up and do not be afraid." And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. This morning I'm going to share with you, as I do from time to time, a sermon written from the first-person perspective of one of the characters in the story, and that is Simon Peter. Little one, I don't know who he is, sometimes. And that's the truth. Sometimes I think he is the greatest wonder worker that ever lived. Sometimes I think he is the harshest master I've ever had. Sometimes I think he is God himself. And sometimes I think, well, he called me Satan, so I wonder. Look, I've only ever done one thing in my life. I'm a fisherman. I know how to prepare the nets and repair them. I know how to cast them and haul them in. I know how to bargain with men in whose faces I can read the fact that they want to steal from me. And I can walk away with enough for my family. But the first day I saw Jesus' face, the first time I looked into his eyes, when he looked at my brother and me sitting there in our boat and said, "Follow me and I'll teach you to haul in a catch of souls." And no, he was not talking about the fish. Well, I knew, little one, that here was a man who was speaking the deepest truth of his heart. I could see it in his face. And my brother and I dropped everything. We dropped our nets and stepped out of our boats and never looked back. Then I thought of him as teacher, and he still is, little one. Everything I count as the truest I have ever known, I learned from him. But then he started his wonder working, and I was shaken to my core. I'm not a storyteller. I'm not one for dreams that tell you what to do or when you'll die. I mostly think that is the result of fish gone bad. But almost immediately after I started following him, my wife's mother became ill, sick unto death with a terrible fever. We chased away the children and called in the mourners and rallied ourselves to bury her. But Jesus came in and looked at her with those terrible, compassionate eyes of his. And he touched her hand, and the fever left her, not in a day, not in a week, but in a moment, that moment. Her color calmed and her eyes cleared and opened, and she looked into that face and smiled and rose from her bed to follow Jesus too. And that day, the people in the neighborhood told one another what had happened, and then they told others at the market. And soon my house was surrounded with people with fevers and demons and leprosy and paralysis, crowds of people, and every one of them, little one, he touched. And they too were healed. He scared people, I can tell you that. They didn't know what to make of him. For the life of me, I didn't know either, but before too long, as the crowds grew that came to see him and hear him and learn from him and be healed by him, I began to understand. And then one day he turned to us, his followers, and he said, "Who do people say that I am?" He asked us so calm, like he didn't really care what the answer was. But I can read a man's face. And I tell you, there was something there. Was it worry? Was it hope? Something. He needed to know. And I listened as the others spoke. "Elijah," one of them said. "Him or Jeremiah," someone else offered. He nodded his head at each suggestion, encouraging us. Then Andrew, my little brother, said, real quietly, "Some say John the Baptist." And oh, little one, his face flushed red, and I thought he was angry, but then I saw the tears in his eyes. And I thought, was it fear? I don't know. But then he turned to me and I became bold. "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God," I said. I almost shouted. I believed it. Who else could he be? He looked at me then most gently and said, "Blessed are you, Simon Peter. You have been listening to my Father in heaven." And I thought, he is the one. He is the Messiah. He is, and my heart, little one, it swelled as if it was about to break. And then he started, I don't know, it sounded like nonsense to me. He began saying that it was time to go to Jerusalem, and that when he got there, the religious leaders would decide it was time for him to suffer and die, but then he would be raised on the last day. And I really shouted, "No, God forbid it, Lord." And then he turned his wrath on me. He was in a fury, and he said, "Get behind me, Satan. You are not listening to my Father in heaven." It was hard to hear what he had to say after that. He was talking about how we were all going to die, that we all had to carry the cross. I remember this one thing very clearly. He said, "Those who want to hold on to their life will lose it. And those who let go of their life for my sake will find it." Well, and here I was. Hadn't I already lost my life for his sake? Little one, I let go. I walked away from my nets and my livelihood and my family to follow him, to follow and learn from a man with the most trustworthy face I had ever seen. Sometimes I think I know just who he is, and then I just don't know. I don't know. It was a week later, I think. Jesus took 3 of us, myself and the brothers, John and James, and we broke off from the others and we climbed a high mountain. Higher and higher we climbed. I don't much care for mountains myself. Tricky weather in mountains. I can read the clouds above the Sea of Galilee like I can read a man's face, but the clouds on a mountain, they can play tricks on you. and that is no joke. So I was uneasy, climbing and climbing, higher and higher. But he must have had his reasons. And then we came to a more level place, high up, and what should happen but a light, a glow, the sun, maybe it came from behind a cloud. I don't know, little one, but his face, all of a sudden, it became unrecognizable. It glowed, it flashed, it was the sun. It was brighter than the sun. His clothes, too, his robe, which was brown, and his cloak, which was another shade of brown, suddenly they were white, almost hard to look at. It was painful to look upon him. That's it. His face was like, can I say it? It was like looking upon the very face of God. And then he wasn't alone. There were two men speaking with him just suddenly. They were there. And how did I know? But they were Moses and Elijah. These great men, I'd heard of them all my life. Moses stood there with two great tablets in his arms. I don't know how he could hold them up. And Elijah, well, he always dressed oddly. And there was a man with a camel hair cloak wrapped around him and a leather belt. So that's who that was. And there they were, Jesus and Moses and Elijah, talking like three fishermen standing by the water, as if they'd known each other for a long time, and that they were wondering, how are the fish running today? Master, I called out. I don't know what gave me the boldness to do it. It is good to be here. I will set up 3 booths, one for you and one for Moses and one for Elijah. I heard my own voice and I thought, I sound mad. No one would ever believe me. I don't even believe me. And while I was wondering this great cloud, not a dark one, but one of those odd mountain clouds that you can't read, bright and unsettling, it just came over us and sort of fell on us, all 6 of us. And then John and James and I, we were on the ground, face down, praying for our lives. Well, we thought this was it. Our time had come. All the talk of dying. We thought, here we go, in Elijah's chariot. But then the voice. A voice like nothing I had ever heard before. It was like thunder, but it was like whispering too, and water rushing and a wave crashing. This is my Son, the beloved, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. And we looked up, and it was just Jesus, little one. And his cloak was brown again, and it was his own dear face again. And he was touching us, each of us, on the shoulders. And he smiled a little and said, don't be afraid. Get up. Let's go. And we had to let go of that mountaintop and go down again to the town, because wasn't there a boy there, possessed, having seizures? And wasn't his father heartbroken and terrified? And didn't they need Jesus? Didn't they need us? Wasn't that our life down there with the people? And so we went down. Little one, sometimes I just don't know who he is, and that is the truth. Sometimes I think he is the greatest wonder worker who ever lived. Sometimes I think he is the harshest master I've ever had. Sometimes I think he is God himself. I have so many questions to ask him, and I long to keep that face before me. I don't know all the answers. I want to keep asking the questions. I want to follow him, little one, because I think I understand that I let go of my life in order to find my life, all in following him. And that is the truth. Thanks be to God. Amen.